Kevin Johnson. I'm the CEO of Mountain View Hospital, and it's my honor and privilege to welcome you to our Bills and Bagels event this morning. Appreciate all of you taking the time to come and to listen to the issues and ask questions, and that's really what this is about. Want to start by reminding you that we would like to have you silence your cell phones or turn them off if you're able to, so we don't have any interruptions that way. I also want to thank and recognize the Spanish Fork Salem Chamber and those individuals who have been instrumental in bringing this to pass this morning. We're grateful for their efforts. And I did want to introduce Clark Karras. Clark, I'm not sure where you sat. Clark is the new director of the Spanish Fork Salem Chamber. So welcome, Clark. Appreciate you being here. And then I know Carrie and Adina, these guys are the ones that are carrying this out. We really appreciate your efforts, and thank you for that. I want to recognize Central Utah Clinic, who sponsored our breakfast this morning. We appreciate their staying involved with this. They've been a great partner and actually have provided our breakfast, I think, since the beginning. So we appreciate Scott Barlow and all of his staff. I know Scott could not be here this morning. He's been a regular, but I know he's out of town, but he continues to be supportive, and we appreciate that. Also, appreciate the Nebo School District, and Rick, thank you, for Superintendent, for letting us use this great facility and for hosting us. So thank you, Rick. We've got several guests here. I want to start by asking all of you who are in local leadership at the city and county level, mayors or city councilmen, anybody that's in that position, will you stand up real fast and let us just recognize you in the audience today? I know I see several mayors and city councilmen, and so we appreciate you being here and taking an interest as well, and wanted to recognize you. We're thrilled to have several of our state legislators here as well, and so I want to just quickly introduce who we have here. We have Senator Deidre Henderson, and then Senator David Hinkins. We have Representative Mike McKell. It's over here. Representative Mark Roberts. Representative Francis Gibson. And Representative Norm Thurston. And then we also have Representative Dean Sampay with us. And so we're honored today. Oh, what did I miss?
Billy.
I'm not elected.
But he's one of the speakers today.
Oh, right. I'm going to introduce Billy here in just a second. Thank you. So we have three speakers before we get to our legislators and hear the issues from them and the things they want to present. And so I'm going to go ahead and announce the order and just ask them to come up and speak in that order. We're allowing, let's see, how many minutes on the speakers? Do they have 10 each?
10 minutes.
Okay.
Then the legislators will briefly introduce themselves and then questions.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. So we're going to first hear from Representative Dean Sampay, who is the House Executive Appropriations Chair. And following Representative Sampay, we'll hear from Senator Deidre Henderson, who is on the Senate Revenue. She is the Senate Revenue and Taxation Chair. And then we have Billy Hesterman here to present to us, who is the Vice President of the Utah Taxpayers Association. And so, Billy, we'll ask you to follow Senator Henderson, if you will. We'll go to that point, and then I'll come up and we'll introduce our legislators. So, Senator.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to be here with you today. My district is Provo, so usually I'm up a little bit further north, but I see a lot of familiar faces, so it's good to be down here. I am going to talk about the budget, this year's budget. I'll talk a little bit about the process we're going through, as well as some of the challenges and some of the specific numbers we're looking at, to give you an idea of sort of the landscape of things. And then I've got 10 minutes, so I'll try and condense this into 10 minutes, and then you can ask questions. I guess we're going to have Q&A later. So any questions you have, I'll be happy to answer at that time. One of the big things to know about our budget is we kind of separate all of the dollars into sort of two categories. The first is what we call one-time. In other words, these are revenue sources that were surpluses to the previous year or one-time sources of revenue. For instance, sometimes there's a lawsuit settlement, and those settlement dollars will come to the state on a one-time basis. And or sometimes we project we're going to have certain needs for Medicaid, for instance, and the actual utilization is lower than what was anticipated, so we have some additional dollars there. But those dollars are not ongoing, we just have them once. And so we can use those dollars, either put them in reserves, or we can spend those dollars, but we only get to spend them for 1 year. Versus the other major category we have, which is ongoing funds, and that's your traditional sales tax revenue, your transportation, gasoline tax, all those taxes that are regular and iterative, we call those ongoing sources of revenue, and those fund, in an ideal world, you would only use ongoing money for ongoing sources, and you would only use one-time money for one-time source uses. Though occasionally we use one-time money for ongoing purposes, which creates these budget structural problems in the future. So we try and minimize that, but occasionally we can use one-time. It's just you have to reappropriate those dollars every year. So our sources, many of our sources are dedicated to specific uses. So for instance, income tax, corporate tax, and escheats. Escheats are just, if somebody dies and they haven't designated where their estate goes, it goes to the state, which isn't a whole lot for the state. But those sources are predominantly and primarily used for education. It's income tax, corporate tax, and those escheats. For the general fund, which in the general fund has some broader sources of use. We use the sales tax. We use what we call the sin tax, and that's like the tobacco and cigarette and alcohol taxes, and severance taxes. Severance taxes are whenever there is a resource that we pull out of the earth, and I think of it in terms of we sever it from the earth, like oil, gas, minerals. When we take that from those resources are taxed, and we call those severance taxes, and those are put into the general fund. We use those specifically for social services, higher education, criminal justice, and debt servicing. And our third major bucket is our transportation fund. Motor fuel tax, special fuel tax, regular vehicle registration fees, those are used for transportation purposes. Now, generally, it's suffice it to say we're supposed to use those revenue streams for those purposes. However, we have a couple of areas in which it gets a little bit gray. For instance, higher education draws from the general fund, as well as it can draw some from the education fund, and sometimes that creates some tension in things. But the other sort of route we have that crosses over the general and transportation fund is what we call this TIF. It's a transportation investment fund, and some of the dollars that we take out of transportation we can put into the general fund, and some of the general fund dollars we can put into this transportation investment fund. So that's generally how our sources and uses work in the state. Where it goes, we have a $13.5 billion budget in general. Most of it goes to, 30% goes to public education, 12% to higher education, and then social services is another 34%. And that public education, social services are the largest budget items we have in the state. And higher education is closely behind that. But the vast majority of our money goes to public education and social services every year. So this year, specifically, these are the numbers you may have heard of in the media. The newspapers have reported that the state of Utah has a surplus this year, right? Our economy has been doing better than it was last year. It's been doing better than anticipated, better than the forecast, which is all good. So if we just look at the general fund and the education fund on a one-time and ongoing basis, because those are predominantly the dollars that we'll be reallocating out this year, reappropriating, it's $325 million ongoing of additional revenue and $313 million of one-time. So immediately everybody says there's $600 million. That's a lot of dollars that can go back to a lot of places, and everybody gets excited about all the dollars that potentially could come back to the state of Utah. There is a however, though. However, we are statutorily required to allocate some of those dollars to certain places. So for instance, retirement funds are automatically taken out. I can talk about the TMPF, I can talk about any of these, but bubble revenue, for instance, the state of Utah, we do a forecast, and we forecast out our trend line as to how much revenue has been coming in every year, what our future projections are of that revenue, and we look at how much of that revenue is above normal. And the thinking is that those dollars that are above normal, we may not always have those. So rather than using them for ongoing purposes, it's more conservative to use them for one-time purposes. And so when we take that out, it's about $118 million that we would take off the table. And we've got reserve amounts, so that already drops it down to $179 million ongoing, and $429 million of one-time dollars. And that's mainly that shift from taking the above-trend revenues and making it so that we don't count on always having those dollars. So you still would say, well, $179 million sounds like a lot of money on an ongoing basis. And 429 sounds like a lot of money on a one-time basis. And I will also say that February 18th, we get updated revenue projections. Every year, our revenue projections, the closer we get to the budget finalization, the better revenue numbers we have. And I will tell you that the revenue numbers are looking like that by the 18th, we'll have probably some additional revenue to either appropriate or put into reserves. The fiscal health dashboard, just this indicator here, I hope you can see that okay. The blue bars just show the amount of rainy day funds we have in our account on a historical basis. And as you can see, where we're at today has grown over the last few years, but it's still below where we were pre-recession, pre-crisis, the great financial crisis of 2008, 2009. The thing that this chart doesn't show is that our liabilities in that time frame have also gone up much, much more rapidly. So we have much greater liabilities than we do today, and we have lower amounts in our total reserves, so therefore we've got a larger gap that we need to make up. So that's a component for fiscal prudence in order to maintain our credit rating, because if our credit rating drops, everything's more expensive for our debt servicing, so we'll have less funding. So we need to take care of that in the background as part of a big piece of this. So if I just take that $179 million and I ignore the reserve issue, if we do public education growth, that's at least $52 million right off the top. And generally we like to try and fund public education growth if we can. A 1% in the WPU, just 1%, which is the above the line funding for education, is another $26 million. Medicaid inflation, minimum Medicaid inflation. This doesn't count any of the expansion things. It doesn't count any of the governor's proposals. That alone, just to keep pace with the growth in Medicaid, is $3 million. Capital improvements. Capital improvements, we are statutorily required to, before we build another building, we have to pay for the ongoing costs and maintenance as well as the upgrades of existing structures. And so unless we build no additional buildings, we've got to pay that $65 million. Health insurance is going to go up another $12 million. A 1% increase in salaries for state employees is $20 million. That gives us $2 million left. And I have not even, WPU, we'd like it to be 3%. We haven't talked at all about some of the ongoing transportation needs, haven't talked at all about some of the water needs. We've got $166 million worth of ongoing water needs and water infrastructure needs. So those dollars get eaten up very quickly. On an ongoing basis, on a one-time basis, this is just dollars that we have one time, that $429 million, we have today $510 million on the building board list. These are proposed projects, whether they be in the universities, for state buildings. We have $510 million already being requested. That doesn't then count. We have $1.2 billion of shovel-ready transportation needs today. And I often tell people with transportation, construction, Utah Foundation uses this analogy. I think it's a good one, but it's a little bit like brushing your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth today, there's not really a major consequence, but you don't brush your teeth over multiple months and years, eventually your teeth all fall out. Our roads are the same way. If we don't repair our roads, it is much more expensive for us to redo those roads in the future. It takes more cost, it takes more time, it takes more resources. So to the degree that we can keep up with the demand, it's less expensive down the road. However, to keep up with the demand is $1.2 billion today. We got $1 billion of pipeline, water pipeline, and what we're told by the water districts is if we don't do anything, by 2025, there will be people turning on their faucets and no water will come out. So there are issues that we've got to address, and needless to say, and the prison, we call it a relocation, but really we should call it a prison rebuild. And the reason is because even if we don't move the prison, we still have to rebuild it. It's dilapidated, the structures are not configured in a way that's efficient, it's not sized large enough for the growth that we're continuing to have with our population, and even with prison reforms, we still are going to have to rebuild that prison. Now, we can talk all day about do we move it, but we still have to rebuild it, and the rebuild cost alone is in the neighborhood of $500 to $800 million. So with that, I think I'm out of time. This is just the process. And at some point, if I get an opportunity, I would like to talk about the process, because we do a base budget, and the base budget is not the budget. You'll hear different reports about the legislature talking about the base budget. The base budget intent is just so that if we can't come to agreement at the end of the session, we don't get what happened with the federal government a year and a half ago, which was a total shutdown. So that's why we put into place a base budget, but it is not anyone's intention that that become the budget moving forward. So we're going through that process now. We'll have new revenue estimates, as I said, February 18th. The subcommittees are about to report, well, actually they have reported on their recommendations for the base budget, and then we're going to start the building block process for the budget moving forward. So with that, I will hold on taking questions until after the other presenters. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm going to keep my remarks brief so that we have more time to dig more into the budget or for Q&A with the other legislators. I am the chair of the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee, and I wanted to go over just briefly what we in the state of Utah value as good tax policy. Every year we have people come before the committee asking for tax credits or increases or things here and there, and it's important to understand kind of the principle of good tax policy that I espouse here in the state of Utah, and that I think most of us in the legislature also agree with. And that is that good tax policy involves a broad base and a low rate. We've had several people already, several bills before my committee, and probably in the House as well, asking for new tax credits or exemptions. Typically, when it comes to exemptions, we like to exempt business inputs. So if there's a material or product that a business purchases to create another product that they then sell, those purchases for materials should not be taxed because then the final product is taxed, and built into that product's price is all of the other taxes, and so people are paying sales tax on a product that has other taxes built into the price, so they're paying taxes on taxes, and it's a very not a transparent way to do things. So we try to exempt business inputs. We also we like to have a nice broad base with a low rate. We have a 5% income tax rate in the state of Utah, and very few tax credits or deductions. We've got rid of almost all of that a number of years ago. And doing so actually helped create some stability in our revenue, which helped us during the economic downturns the last few years. And so our state has really done very, very well. And as you can see from Representative Sampay's presentation, we are very careful with our money in the state of Utah. We're very fiscally responsible, and we're very proud of that, and we need to continue to do that. It's very easy to spend other people's money and to fudge things here and there, but you get into trouble long term when you do that. And I'll give you one example. I'm on the Social Services Sub-Appropriation Committee, and we just heard from one of our departments here in the state of Utah that for the past 5 years has been using one-time federal money, grants, stimulus money, other federal money that they could find to fund ongoing projects, important programs, programs for the blind. And they ran out of the federal money, and they don't have any more. And so if we don't give them millions of dollars right away, these services for people who are in need will be gone within a month. So it's very important to be responsible about where you get the money, what kind of money you use to fund programs, and how big you expand programs. Because when you expand programs too large, you can't keep up with the costs. And raising taxes is not usually a viable way to increase revenues long-term to pay for things. Every decision that we make in the state regarding tax policy either makes us more competitive or less competitive. The trend the last 2 years around the country has been to cut taxes. 17 states in 2013 cut taxes. Last year in 2014, 14 states cut taxes. So if we want to stay economically viable, we need to consider our own tax policy. Our corporate income tax, for example, is the highest in the states around us. 2 of the states that surround us don't have any corporate income tax at all. Other states have less corporate income tax, a lower corporate income tax than we have. And as we look to maintaining a good economic environment to provide revenue to pay for things like our social service programs, education, we need to remain economically competitive. And to do that, I think we need to have a corporate income tax cut. And that is something that I've been working on this session. And it's interesting because we have a surplus. Representative Sempe explained how it's not really as much as it looks like after you take out all of the costs associated with it. But one thing is for sure, if we raise taxes, as some people have proposed, and one of those proposals didn't pass a House committee, it will make us less competitive, not more competitive. It may increase revenues in the short term, but if you look long term, it will be a detriment to our state. The last principle I want to talk about as we move forward and ask questions here, government gets more of what it incentivizes. So we have to be very careful in everything we do, in tax policy, when we're implementing other policies, that we have to make sure that the principles align with where we want to go, the incentives. We always offer some kind of incentive for people, and we have to make sure that our incentives are aligning with the direction we want to head. And I can go into more detail there, but when you incentivize certain behavior through policy, including tax policy, you get more of that behavior. And if you disincentivize behavior, you get less of it. So anyway, I'm going to yield the rest of my time to Billy.
The chance to speak this morning, and I will be brief. I know you want to hear from your elected officials and not from just some hack with the Taxpayers Association. So, like I said, I'll try to be quick. Senator Henderson noted on one piece of good news, at least from our perspective, that's already happened so far with the session. There was one bill being considered that would have been a 1% income tax increase across the board here in the state of Utah. It was amended in the committee. It was heard in the House Education Committee this week to be a half a percent income tax increase. And luckily, the members of the committee were able to see it differently, decided that wasn't the best direction for the state to go. So we've had at least one taxpayer victory so far this session, and that we won't be seeing that income tax increase. So that's one thing that I'm happy to report to you today. Another issue, there's 2 more issues I hope I can cover here in these quick few minutes. One being the gas tax proposals that are being considered on the Hill, and then another thing I'd just like to make a quick pitch to you all about Healthy Utah, or our concerns about Healthy Utah, the governor's Medicaid expansion plan. So the gas tax is something we've been very interested in since I've started with the association. I started there back in October. We knew this was coming. we know that this is a tax that is really starting to see the end of its life. Many people are now switching over to more fuel-efficient cars. We're all getting 25 to 30 miles per gallon. Some people are driving electric cars now. Some people are driving hybrids. Some have natural gas. So the gas tax isn't really keeping up with the need for what we need to fund our roads and keep them, well maintained, and also building what we need in the future. So we've had a conversation as a taxpayers association of what can be done to this gas tax to make sure that we're still maintaining the need that there is in the state to have these roads. And there's been a few proposals that have already been put out there, and so hopefully we can go over some of those, and also our plan that we've had that we'd like to see happen. The first proposal, one that's came out this week, I believe it's Senate Bill 160. It's sponsored by Senator Van Tassel. This just simply raises the gas tax by a dime. So right now, the state gas tax is 24.5 cents per gallon. This will raise it up to 34.5 cents per gallon. Also, it increases the diesel tax, I believe, by a nickel, and then the tax on natural gas vehicles. Actually, they take the hardest hit. I think they go up about 24 cents, or they're at 8 cents and go up to 24 cents, if I'm remembering right. And that's actually maybe that might be the one part of that proposal we could probably get on board with, because we do feel that right now those that simply are just buying gas or diesel are carrying the burden for paying for the roads, while those that have the hybrid car or those that have a natural gas car aren't necessarily paying for their impact that they're having on the road because they're avoiding that tax at this time. So if there's something we can do to kind of bring some type of equalization there amongst all the road users, that's what we're looking at. Another proposal that we know is out there is a proposal that would take the gas tax and turn it into a percentage based on the price of gas. And it would have a floor and a ceiling, and it would be based on cents per gallon. The floor would be the current rate that we're at now, 24.5 cents, and the ceiling would be the 34.5 cents. And that percentage rate would just flow until you get to that point where the percentage is yielding as much as 34.5 cents would give back to the state. It has a 3-year cap on it, on the ceiling. When the 3 years is up, the legislature could then decide to either keep that cap in place and say that's as much money as we need for roads, or they could eliminate that cap and then it then becomes somewhat like a sales tax or an index tax, where it just kind of is a tax increase, in our opinion, on autopilot. So we have some concerns about that plan. We'll see if that hasn't been numbered yet. That's one thing that's still being worked out and talked about. As far as the Taxpayers Association, this is something that our board got together on and put together. I don't know if anyone is a technical. If I just keep hitting things, I'll try.
I'm not sure where Rick went. He knows their AV stuff.
All right, well,
Do it outside.
we'll ad lib. So what we've looked at is modeling the gas tax after the property tax model that we have here in the state of Utah. Every year we know with property taxes that there's a guaranteed revenue rate that government is able to receive. They're guaranteed to get what they got the previous year, plus new growth in the area with their property. And we've modeled our plan of the gas tax that same way. We guarantee the prior year revenue that the gas tax yield, plus new growth. And our new growth that we put in as the component on that would be vehicle miles traveled on the road. Now, before I go too far, I say vehicle miles traveled, and everyone starts to get a little uncomfortable because they go, well, that means Big Brother. That means government is tracking me. We're putting meters in cars and seeing where everybody's going. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about with vehicle miles traveled is the aggregate number that UDOT keeps of all the miles traveled here on the state. So if it increases, if there's an increase in the miles traveled in a percentage over the previous year, then we would say, okay, legislature, you're able to gain that much more money based on the miles traveled on Utah's roads. So that way it's aligning it to make it more of a user fee. And we think that's the proper way to go with this. A fuel tax should be a user fee. Those who use it should pay for it. It shouldn't be something that those that aren't using are paying for. So that's why we modeled it that way. We think it's a sound plan. it probably doesn't, the biggest criticism we've received from lawmakers when we've talked to them about it is they've said, well, Billy, this just doesn't give us the revenue that we want over time. We're not sure this is enough. And I personally, we've said, well, that's okay with us. We'd like for you to look at ways to be innovative and see if you can, build these roads at a price that's the best cost for the taxpayer. And also personally, as we've run the models, it does produce quite a bit of revenue for them over time that we do think would be sufficient for the needs of the state. Obviously, we'll go back and forth about that as time goes on. So the certified fuel tax rate is what we've called it, and we hope it gets some consideration as we talk about gas tax throughout the session. Lastly, I wanted to hit on Governor Herbert's Healthy Utah plan. This is something that has been concerning to us. We appreciate the governor, and we know that he would love to find a way to provide some health care for those that don't have it right now. And he's put together quite the plan for it. And to us, it really does come right to being darn near close to just being general Medicaid expansion. And I think Representative Chaffetz said it best yesterday when he was speaking to the legislature. As he said, if Utah goes down this direction, this makes it just that much harder for Obamacare to be repealed or to be changed or to be fixed, because you can have a conservative state like Utah now being a part of it. And that would be to us, that would be one big victory for the administration, that they'd be able to say, look, even Republican state Utah that doesn't like Barack Obama at all has now signed on to Obamacare through their Healthy Utah. So that's a big concern we have. We know the governor's big pitch is he'll say, we're paying $300+ million to the federal government. We just want to bring that money back. And that's the seen part. What's concerning to us is what's unseen. What are the unseen costs that will come to the state as we implement that program? What are the unseen burdens that will come to our taxpayers as we move years down the road, and maybe the federal government's going to have to pull back on the money they put into that program? What will that do to the state budget? So we have a lot of concerns about that, and we're not outrightly opposed yet, but like I say, we're definitely concerned. And I would encourage all of you to become informed on it, become educated, talk to your lawmakers, let them know what you're comfortable with. Let them know about your opinions on Medicaid expansion in Healthy Utah and what you think the right way is to go. Because right now there seems to be some momentum, at least, that the governor's plan will at least have some consideration. So, I appreciate your time. I know most of you want to hear from your elected officials, so I will be quiet now so you can hear from them. But thank you for giving me your time this morning.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to allow each one of our additional legislators that are here that have not presented already to briefly introduce themselves and their role in the legislature, the things that they're doing. But then what we'd like to do is have that be fairly brief so that we can get to questions. When we get to the questions, and they have many questions already in front of them, we would ask them to spend no more than a minute addressing that question so that we can get to as many questions as we can. And then again, if there's further follow-up, hopefully we can do some of that follow-up via email or other things. And again, write your contact information at the bottom of your questions if you'd like to get more follow-up. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll start over here with Representative Roberts. We'll start with you, let you do a quick introduction, and then we'll just move across the table, okay?
Thank you. I'm Representative Roberts, and I just want to echo Kevin's words again on the youth here. It's awesome seeing you guys here. Some of the youth, I don't know if you're here because you need points for your class or you just want to be involved. I'll assume the latter. But it's good seeing you guys here. Hopefully you keep coming. I represent half of Salem, Elkridge, Payson, and then everything going out west, Santa Clara, Genola Goshen, all the way up to Cedar Fork, District 67. And this is my second term. And I sit on, so real quick, committees I sit on are the Business and Labor and Law Enforcement Criminal Justice Standing Committees. And then I'm in the Natural Resources Appropriations Committee, which Senator Hinkins and Representative McKellar are the chairs of that committee. Do you want to just do an introduction or?
Just introduction for now, and then we'll go back to questions.
Okay.
I'm Senator David Hinkins, and I reside in Barron, Utah, which is in Emory County, south of here. My Senate district entails the south part of Heber City, which is Daniel, Charleston, and Timberlake, as well as Springville and Mapleton in Utah County, and then on down to Indianola and then I take in all of Carbon, Emery, San Juan, and Grand County. So to drive across my Senate district is about an 8 to 9 hour drive. If I leave Heber City and drive to Navajo Mountain, I have to drive 2 hours through Arizona, through Kayenta, Arizona, to get back into Navajo Mountain from Monument Valley. So I spend a lot of time on the road, and people don't get to see me as much in Utah Valley as probably I'd like to see. And because I am spread pretty thin. I chair the Natural Resource Appropriations Subcommittee with Representative Mike McCall. I also serve as the chairman of the commission for the lands to take back Utah lands, and so I'm going to talk about that. I have one of the questions here, so with that, I'll pass my time.
I'm Senator Deidre Henderson. I live here in Spanish Fork. I represent South Utah County, Senate District 7, half of Vineyard, parts of Provo, parts of Springville, all of Spanish Fork, Salem, Payson, Woodland Hills, Elk Ridge, and half of Santaquin. And I chair the Senate Revenue and Taxation Committee. I'm on the Business and Labor Committee, Social Services Appropriations Subcommittee, and I also chair the Federal Funds Commission, and I chair the Transparency Advisory Board.
Thank you, Representative Francis Gibson. Just a second, I don't think anyone can appreciate the size of the area where Senator Hinkins represents. It's the biggest Senate seat, I think, in territory in the state, and he does a good job representing the parts of Utah County where here in Springville and Mableton. I appreciate you being here today. Representative Francis Gibson, I represent Mableton, almost all of Springville, not quite, and then the eastern part of Spanish Fork, up the east side near the golf course, all the way up to Birdseye and Covered Bridge and through the canyon there. I no longer chair a committee, but I am on the Education Committee, and I'm also Education Appropriations, and I was just recently elected to be the House Majority Whip, and so that new position puts me on a whole bunch of other committees. I don't chair any of them, but I do have a lot different role than I have had in the past.
I'm Norm Thurston. I represent District 64, which, despite Representative Gibson's claim to have almost all of Springville, I have a good chunk of Springville, about a third of Springville, so North Springville, South Provo, and the Spanish Fork Airport. So if you live at the airport, apparently we have a couple of people who do live out there. If you're here, I'd like to meet you. I am on the Health and Human Services Standing Committee, Government Political Subdivisions Standing Committee, and the Public Education Appropriations Committee. And this is my first time at the rodeo, so I'm looking up and down. I'm the new guy of the legislature.
I'm Dean Sonpei, and I think I mostly did my introduction. I'm a representative out of Provo, chair of the Executive Appropriations Committee, and I really yield the rest of my time.
Mike McKell, House District 66, and we're sitting in my district. It's good to be here. It's good to have all of you here. I represent Spanish Fork, most of Salem, and all of Woodland Hills, Lakeshore, Benjamin, and it is strange that Representative Thurston represents the airport. It's a little carve out. I don't understand why, but it is weird. I chair the Natural Resource Appropriation Committee with Senator Hinkins. It's been an honor to serve with him. I actually grew up in Emery County and grew up in Farron with Senator Hinkins, and he's been a longtime family friend, and it's been fun to have that friendship continue on the Hill. Serve on the Natural Resource Standing Committee, Rev and Tax, and Ethics Committee as well. Thank you.
Sure. So I've got this question here. Carrie handed me. It says, what is leadership doing to curtail the overwhelming number of bills introduced every year? So luckily we have a member of leadership here with us, and I won't yield my time to him on this, but he's the majority whip. So if we get to a certain threshold, he gets the whip out and starts saying stop. No, that doesn't really happen. So I don't know that they can do anything to stop legislators from filing bills, but they can help make sure we go through the process correctly. And they have implemented a number of things this year to make sure bills go through the correct process and they aren't rushed through. Oftentimes we get a lot of bills that come through the last few days that haven't had all the hearings that they should get, and we get them through the last few days. So we've extended committee meetings 3 days, is that right? 3 days to make sure that the senators don't skip the House hearings, and that we get the senators' bills in our committee meetings on our side, and we hear them, and I think the Senate's done the same, so our House bills will go through their committee meetings as well. It's a long process to get a bill through the system. It's got to go through the House committee, got to go through the House floor, got to go through the Senate committee, then the Senate floor, and then signed by the governor. We're trying to this year to make sure that all bills, as much as possible, go through that entire process. I believe House leadership has given the Rules Committee more latitude and ability to kill bills that they don't maybe feel are appropriate, or maybe waste of time or whatnot, and maybe send them to some committees can kill bills easier than others, and direct bills in different ways. So I know they have directed the Rules Committee to do that. I think as far as number of bills every year, one difficulty I think legislators have is figuring out how to tell their constituents no on ideas that their constituents bring to them. I know a lot of legislators across the state, they have their constituents call them up with an idea. Hey, I've got this idea, I want you to run this bill for me, whatever it may be. And so a lot of us end up with a lot of these bills, and maybe a lot of them, aren't really necessary, are just an idea from some constituent. And I'm not saying that we don't appreciate those ideas. We need those. That's how we figure out what we need to fix. But it's hard to filter through those sometimes and to, tell your constituent, no, your idea is a bad idea. And we end up getting those up on the Hill, and so you get representatives and senators that carry large numbers of bills, and then those start going through the whole process. So other than that, I don't know how they can stop us from filing bills currently.
Can I just add that?
Yeah.
So this year we've implemented a policy to where in the past, senators would just run their bill in the Senate, or House members would just run their bills in the House, and they would deliberately delay having the bill heard in the other body. And so in order to pass a bill, I have to get through a Rules Committee, a standing committee hearing, and get 38 votes on the House floor. Then I have to repeat that process in the Senate, a Rules Committee, a standing committee, and then have senators vote and approve it. And so it's quite a lengthy process to get through. And we've had legislators both in the House and the Senate try to game the system and say, well, I do not want to subject my superior legislation to the other House. I will just wait and get it to the floor and just run it and skip the process. And so as House leadership this year, we worked with the Senate and got the Senate to agree that every bill would have a hearing in each House. And those are the bills that would be prioritized, the ones that had 2 hearings and 2 floor debates to get through that process. We do have legislators that have as many as 41 bills. And there are a couple that have more than 30 bills filed. And so that's one of the ways to delay it. If you have to get through every process now, there's no way you can do 40 bills.
And just one more thing to add to that. There were some legislators, I think, that had a little bit of heartache over this, but because it makes it a little bit harder to get your bills done. But in my opinion, as legislators, we need to respect the process more than we care about our own bills. There's always another year we can come back with their bills, but we have to respect the process over, I got to get my bill's more important, I got to get it through, no matter how I try to game the system to get it through. The process is important, it's there for a reason.
Thank you. My question was oil severance. What is the effect of $43 a barrel on oil severance, and what is the price floor for a healthy severance stream? $43 would look awfully good to the Uinta Basin because of the heavy wax oil that they have out there. They're actually getting paid $28 a barrel at the refinery in Salt Lake City. And when the oil was up at $100 a barrel. Of course, we, as the school trust lands, a lot of this oil is being taken off of trust lands, which about anywhere from 12 to 18% of the royalties off the oil goes to the school trust fund, which is up to almost it's almost $2 billion if not over by now. And so that money goes into the schools, and it's spread out to every school through the parents' committees that they have in the school districts. And then all that can be spent out of the trust fund is the interest off of that. There's been very little interest coming off of it in the last few years. It's been managed by the treasurer not to lose money because of the downturn in 2008. The retirement fund lost a lot of money, and so they've actually, Mel Brown ran a bill last year that takes and has a committee that's almost elected that will actually invest that money to get a better return on it at low risk, but at a lot higher yield. And when oil, I don't believe that oil is going to stay as cheap as it is. We're already starting to see gas prices go up. The other countries, they say that we won't be competitive because Saudi Arabian countries can do it for like $10 to $20 a barrel to produce oil, but their budgets have been set up on $90 to $100, even $120 barrel. So their governmental systems as well, they don't have income taxes in a lot of them. They actually just have the royalties off the oil and gas. It's like in Alaska, they get if you're a resident of Alaska, you get anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 a year. And rather than paying taxes, you actually get money back for living in Alaska because of the royalties that come off of oil. And so we are going to see a shortfall in the next couple of years, though, because of it. There was about 50 to 60 oil rigs in the Uinta Basin alone, and now that's down to about 20, and there's talk of even more leaving. And just like with gas, most of the production comes off of gas and oil within the first, say, 2 to 3 years. After that, it starts tapering off, and it has to take a lot of money to big oil, like you've heard, fracking the wells to be able to get more oil production up. And so if they don't have the money, the high prices to do that, because the price of fracking wells is up to $250,000 to $350,000 a well. And so it's not feasible to do that if you're not going to get a revenue that's going to be a marketable price. And so we are going to see a big downturn in the money that comes into the state. We send out about $400 million to the federal government, from revenues off of our mineral and oil extractions in Utah. We get back about $177 million. That's what it was this year. And we'll be seeing a decline in that because of that. So our budgets are going to be so times up. Thanks.
Can I add one thing to that, Senator Hinkins?
Yes.
One of the impacts we have right now that we have to deal with as a committee, and Senator Hinkins knows this as well. We have an office, our UGS office, our Geological Survey Office, and some of their revenue is tied to oil, gas, and mining. And if I have the number wrong, correct me, but I believe they're going to lose 12 FTEs or full-time employees, which is a big hit for an office. Right now, they actually have 9 people that are near the end of their careers or naturally going to retire on their own. So we've been able to absorb that. But in that office, there will be at least 12 FTEs, 9 retirements, three actual state employees that will be laid off in that office because some of the revenue is tied in that office. But we've been able to absorb that. We've paid close attention, and I've got the exec approach chair next to me, and I haven't asked him for money yet because I think we can do it within our own committee. But that's a concern. I mean, we see that across the state.
Also, one of the questions was, why don't we use our own gas and oil, and why do we have to buy our oil from other countries? I know that we can't run out of oil if we use our own, and that's very true, and we have been, and that's why you see a decline in prices. Actually, the United States has become an exporter instead of an importer, and we are very competitive, and that's why the prices have been driven down, is because of that. A lot of the countries that basically, like they say, don't like us, we've been funding their terrorism as far as I'm concerned, and I think that's been cut down. They're struggling, the other countries are struggling a lot because of that, and with the pipeline coming through from Canada and also picking up American oil to go to the coast to Houston to be able to reprocess through the Seattle refineries as well as Texas refineries, was making us a lot more independent, which we should be, and I think we're on the right track there. It's causing a lot of havoc throughout the rest of the world, and the shortage of the oil prices, low oil prices.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions here. One of them, and they're quick. One of them, it says, not budget related, really a task force to determine why people in Utah don't vote. Why not just ask the constituents and then work on the responses? A committee will not discover the reasons, but rather just sit in their chairs and support each other. I probably agree with that. That a task force probably won't do much good in discovering why Utahns don't vote. That's up to all of you. And I imagine that the people in this room are pretty good at going out and voting. The key is to make sure that you're helping those in your circle of influence understand the process and understand the importance, and teaching your own children and families the importance of being involved. Because I just talked to a group of young college kids up on the hill yesterday, and I said, really, when you look at things, very, very few people make a difference. Very few people can make a difference on the Hill during the legislative session, anytime. And I told these kids, make sure you are one of those people. And it's true for all of us. Make sure you are one of those people who makes a difference, and your influence is felt, because it can be. It's not hard to have your influence felt. The next question, in a follow-up to the question about the number of bills, does the new process mean that we will not see the shameful process of setting aside the rules in the last days of the session in order to ramrod bills through? I think that probably there will be less suspension of the rules, although in the Senate, we have, the Senate and House both have the 3 reading rule requirement, meaning each bill has to be read on the floor 3 times. The first time is when the bill is simply introduced, the reading clerk reads the short title and the bill number, and then in the Senate, we actually debate the bills twice on the Senate floor. Each bill gets debated twice, House bills and Senate bills. And so we have to set that rule, we have to suspend that rule, the last day, because we have to end at some point. And so the rule is you debate the bill on the second reading, and then you have to wait 24 hours to debate the bill on the third reading. So there has to be a point where we do set that, suspend that rule. And then I believe the House permanently suspends that rule, right? The House only does the bill. Your third reading, where is your second reading? You just skip it?
Committee report.
Oh, it's the committee report? Okay. So they do it a little bit differently over in the House. They only debate the bill once. And if they debated each bill twice, I think that would be a really good way to cut down on the number of bills that get passed.
That's in the House.
In the House, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think that I concur with Representative Roberts that the process is really important. It's not how many bills are passed or how many bills are filed. It's the process. If we have a fair process, then that's what's important. And I think that curtailing the number of bills a legislator could file would actually curtail your voices, because we're there to represent you. And it would be an unfair, I think, an unfair silencing of your voices if we were to do that. But the process is there to work, and we need to work through that process. Thank you.
I'm going to try to pour through these. I've got several here. First one that I got was, with the expansion of growth at Utah Valley University, I feel we've lost a valuable educational tool for students with no true community college here in Utah County. What can we do to provide this type of educational opportunity for our kids? Utah Valley is growing. It's the fastest growing university in the state, and if you include full-time and part-time students, it is just right on the heels of the University of Utah with regards to being the largest university. That university is, last year there was some equity funding that went into place to make sure that Utah Valley was funded at the same level as the research institutions, which are the University of Utah and Utah State University. And so that funding helped get some programs and do some expansion within what they're offering. I do know, as I've met with President Holland and a few others at Utah Valley University, they are really trying to maintain some of their technical school training programs and try to make sure that that's a place for everyone to come and to have an opportunity. The classes are getting bigger. It's getting bigger because they're running out of space. I don't know if that answers the question I see the name, and I'm willing to send you an email. We can talk more in depth. But I do know that President Holland is committed to still providing an opportunity for everyone to have an education there who wants to go there. It is bigger. It is not as small. And I guess without trying to build a new university of some sort, to get back to that old feel of however you remember UVU or UVCC or UVSC, depending on how old you are, you've seen it come through. But I would say that there's still Snow College, just a little bit away in Sanpete County, which is a great school, and it's still an opportunity to have a smaller type experience. Another one, what is being considered to reduce class size in our public schools? And has there been any consideration regarding making mandatory or full-day, all-day kindergarten? I do know that, I know there's a bill. First of all, let me say, every year there seems to be about 400 to 500 education bills. There are 104 legislators. Each one of us have an idea of why we think education should be better. We're not a local school board, we're not a state school board, but that being said, it tends to be the number one topic that most constituents want to talk about, and so we all want to address it. So to the part of the question, class size reduction, we do have a class size reduction line. We are trying to put more money there. However, school districts have the flexibility to spend that money the way they want. And I do know that last year, and maybe again this year, there is a bill to introduce a project to put more certified teachers' aides in classrooms. So you have a teacher and then another person within, when you have 34, 35, 36 students in a class, having that extra adult in the classroom can potentially help some of the demands and some of the teaching that does go on. And without just building more buildings and another classroom, to take 36 and divide it into 2 18s, that becomes, from a capital expense, cost prohibitive. So I do know that there's a pilot project, and I don't know which district will get it, but to put a teacher's assistant. And most of that focus would probably be in elementary schools. And the other one is about all-day kindergarten. That too has been, there is a district in Salt Lake, and forgive me if I cannot remember which one it is, that does have all-day kindergarten. Most of that has been used in the areas of Title I schools. Title I schools are in areas where the median income is very low, and those are typically poor schools. I grew up in Texas, all-day kindergarten, very successful program, but we have a pretty vocal group here that feel like we're trying to rush kids out of their home by offering all-day kindergarten. And so there's also some political implications when that issue comes up. It tends to be pretty divisive. Should we have all-day kindergarten or should we not? And so that's the all-day kindergarten question. Last one, what is the process of getting Utah out of Common Core? I know the governor and the attorney general just released a report yesterday afternoon. I did not hear the report totally, but according to the governor and attorney general, the Common Core is okay. And the attorney general, one of the questions I would ask, and I've got this asked, and I have not gotten a response, is Common Core is a set of standards, and then the curriculum should be set by local school boards. My question that I've always heard is that we cannot change Common Core standards by more than 15%. I've been told by the governor that that is not true. I do have a question into the Attorney General to ask if that is the case, and that is something I want to follow up on. What are your thoughts about partisan school board elections? I've been there for 6 years. Partisan school board elections have failed every time. There's another bill that's coming out. It's passed the Senate Education Committee. We will see where it gets into the House. Historically, I'm moving toward we need to do something different. Our current process isn't working. I voted for partisan school boards last time, it failed. I do have another bill out that would require a state school board member to obtain 2,000 signatures with at least 300 or 2% from every district that they represent. Currently, no one knows. I want to ask just a question, just a quick test, and please don't be embarrassed. I'm not going to put you on the list and call you. How many of you know who your state school board member is? Just raise your hand if you know who your state school board member is. That in itself says that's the problem, and that's where a lot of the standards, a lot of things. And so if you live here in this area, your state school board member is Mark Openshaw. And so that's something that we need to fix. And so my bill will require 2,000 signatures to be put on the bill. But it also goes and looks at the state school board. I've got 20 seconds left. The state school board has 7 members who are not voting members, but yet they have heavy influence. They meet in the executive committee, they participate in debate and argument. My bill will also eliminate those 7 members who are not voting. If you're to vote on state school board issues, that you have to be elected to do that. And so there's a partisan bill coming along. Well, it has a Senate debate possibly this week, and it will come to the House, and we'll see what happens. If that bill fails, I will be actively pursuing buying as an alternative to make sure we get more notoriety and more people knowing who's on the state school board. I've deliberately held my bill back, wanting to see what would happen and moving forward.
All right, I have a couple, we actually have 3 questions here. I'm going to try to at least do 2 of them. I cannot speak quickly and short like these guys yet. It's a skill I have not yet obtained. But my background is as an economist, so you're going to get economics answers to both of these questions, and I'm going to try to answer. So if you fall asleep, I will understand. Nothing against you. All right, so here we go. So the first question has to do with any willing provider laws in healthcare. So the economics answer is oftentimes there are things that we want, but we don't want to pay for. So it would be really, really nice if you could go to any doctor in the world for free. That would be really nice. That'd be great. You get sick, you say, I want to go to the Mayo Clinic, I want to go to India, I want to go to Brazil, I want to go anywhere I want, and it's free. The reality is that's not how the world works. Anytime you expand that options, there's a benefit and there's also a cost to that. So for example, in restaurants, some restaurants have Coke products and some offer Pepsi products, and even though I don't do either of those, some of you wish that all restaurants had both, because it's frustrating when you're a Coke person and you go to the restaurant and all they have is Pepsi, or if you're a Pepsi person, you go to the restaurant and all they have is Coke, and I see that on people's faces, all you have is Coke, or all you have is Pepsi. Like, why don't you have everything? Well, the answer is it's because there are costs. There are reasons why they don't do that. So when it comes to any willing providers, that's how the market works. You can buy insurance plans out there, and your employer can buy them for you that have any willing provider. You can go anywhere you want. They're really, really expensive, because when insurance companies can negotiate with provider groups or clinics to tighten those networks down, they can get cheap. And in the marketplace, what happens is, and we've seen this, I think right now we are seeing some of the most narrow networks we've seen in a long time, but we're also seeing the point where you can get a really cheap, bad product that nobody wants to buy, and then it swings back the other way. They start relaxing the networks and the price goes up again. It swings back and forth. So the question is, shouldn't the state government just step in and tell all the insurance companies that you all have to have any willing provider? And as an economist, I have a problem with that. I like to see the market figure this out on their own, because it'll get that balance between cost and benefit better. I know from a provider perspective it's frustrating when you're on the out. If I was the Pepsi salesman, I'm probably frustrated every day that all these places out there don't have Pepsi, that all they have is Coke. And that's frustrating. And it might not seem fair to some people, and it might seem like you need somebody to step in and say, you have to let me sell my product in the marketplace. But I'll tell you, I've told people this, you don't want us, look at us on this road. Do you want us deciding whether it's Coke or Pepsi? No, we're not. This is not the group that you want making that decision. The marketplace will make a much better decision than 104 legislators. So now I'm in trouble with all the guys on the left. Okay, I'll go to the next question. All right, so the next question has to do with Healthy Utah, and I'm going to be really brief about this one because we could spend literally hours and still not answer questions. I'm going to pose to you questions that we have to struggle with. If I propose to you that we could put 5% of the population on a brand new government entitlement program, and it was at no cost to you, How many of you would think that's the right thing to do? Now, I'm not going to ask for show of hands or anything, just I want you to think about that one for a second. And then let me tell you some of those follow-up part of that. What if you could take people who all they have to do is work 29 hours a week and they could get free health insurance. And what if you said, look, that's out there, that's an opportunity, but instead of doing that, I'm not going to make you do the work. I'm just going to give you the free health insurance without actually working the 29 hours a week. So again, think in your mind, is that what you want to do? So that's what we're struggling with at the state legislature, is we're being asked to create a brand new government program where we're going to take 5% additional of the population, this isn't the ones who are already on the program, 5% more of the population, and put those on a government program that taxpayers will have to pay for probably forever. And then when you think about that, who are those people? Some of those people, not all, but some of those people are people who all they have to do is work 29 hours a week and they can get free health insurance. And this is 29 hours a week in any job. It's 29 hours a week mowing lawns, it's 29 hours a week babysitting, it's literally just about anything, and they could get it free. But instead of having them do it that way, we're being asked to take care of them and put them on a taxpayer-funded program. And that's where we are. I just want to wrap that up and say, I think everybody up here wants to do something for the most vulnerable, for the people that really, truly need help. I haven't talked to anybody, maybe one person, but they're not here, that doesn't want to help anybody at all. I think most of us would say there are people out there who need help, and that it's good for us to help them. And we're looking at options so we can help those who are the most vulnerable among us, those who literally can't work because they have a debilitating disease, illness, mental health problem, something else, and figure out a way to help them without putting everybody on this brand new government entitlement program. So I know those aren't the best answers. These are really hard questions, and I'd love to talk to anybody afterwards to get more detail about it.
Norm, can I interject for 1 second?
Sure.
I just need to put on the record say that I'm not supporting Health Utah. We have kids, 1,800 kids right now that are severely disabled on a waiting list that can't be served in a system that's already existing. We have lots of kids and families that are in programs right now that aren't getting served because we've made cuts back. And I would feel more obligated to help the ones that are currently in our system that are the truly disabled and truly hurt and injured, both mentally and physically, before I would want to do that. There's a line item for respite care. We have parents who have severely disabled children. Maybe some of you know them. I know at the church that I go to, I have a family that leaves their son or daughter in a wheelchair just outside a sacrament meeting because of their audible sounds that they make can be disrupting. But respite care provides someone to come in and watch their kids for 2 or 3 days while they can just take the rest of their family away just to get a mental recharge. Those are issues that are currently in place that are severely underfunded. But this is a mom and dad who are keeping their child, not really receiving any types of other services, but could use little things like that. And to jump off into another Health Utah plan is probably not, it is someplace I'm not willing to go right now. And I'm not putting anyone else on the spot, but I really wanted to hit on the amount of kids that we're currently not serving in the existing Medicaid program, and to expand brings me pause.
So I had several questions as well, and one of my names was on this Healthy Utah question, but the specific question related to the Healthy Utah, which I'll try and address briefly, is why can't we start Healthy Utah, try it for a few years, and then just stop? That's the question, we get it all the time. For me, there's a component of that doesn't get discussed a lot, but the analogy I think of, I grew up in Hawaii, and growing up, my dad was in the Air Force, and so we lived on multiple military bases all over the country. But one of the places that he was stationed at was Hickam Air Force Base. And Hickam Air Force Base, our house was right up against Pearl Harbor. So the back of our backyard was literally, I could throw a rock into Pearl Harbor. There was just one fence. You know, we could go walk in and out past the fence, but living there, I would see as a kid, I was in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade at the time, but we would watch the ships, I would watch the ships come into the harbor. And there was all different kinds of ships, from these little, speed boats that could just whip around all over the place, to these large battleships all the way up to these huge aircraft carriers. And the aircraft carriers, if you've never seen one in real life, they don't look like a ship up close. They look like a moving island. They are so large. But unlike the speedboats that could just turn around on a dime, the aircraft carriers, they don't move quickly. They don't turn quickly because they're just so large. There's several football fields in length. So given that, the healthcare industry is a little bit more like an aircraft carrier in that it doesn't change rapidly. It doesn't move quickly. In Utah, we started major healthcare reforms with what we called our version of accountable care. We looked at changing payment structures. We looked at doing things in a way that rewarded value and outcomes. Well, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, or even Healthy Utah, doesn't use those kinds of incentives. It uses more of the old fee-for-service model. The more you do, the more you get paid. It creates incentives that are not consistent with what we had started to do in Utah. When we infuse up to $900 million of more federal and state money into a system in the old way, it changes. It causes things to change. It causes incentives. It causes buildings to be built in ways in which are not conducive to the directions that we had wanted to go. And we can't, if we withdraw that $900 million, have things just change right back. So there are consequences to making decisions of that magnitude. And so that's just my comment on the Health of Utah. Now, I had two other questions, which I think are perhaps, well, no, one's not necessarily shorter. But the first is, how does 1% state employee raise compare to an increase in cost of living, or the increase in cost of living? And that's easy. It doesn't compare very well. A 1% increase in state employee salaries is about $7 million more per year for the state. Compare that to WPU. A 1% increase in WPU is about $26 million per year. But that 1% increase in state employee salaries does not keep up with the cost of living. Now, to complicate that problem, we have not given state employees a cost of living adjustment commensurate with cost of living increases, which is running around 2.5% currently for a number of years, and so they continue to fall behind. So, the short answer is it doesn't compare very well, which means we would like to do more to keep at least up with the cost of living, but we have to juxtapose that against all the other demands and needs, and it'll be a prioritization process that we go through. The other question is related to transportation funding, and the question relates specifically to, in order to spread the funding for roads evenly across those who use the roads instead of more heavily on those with 100% gas-fueled cars, why not increase the registration fees or tack a tax onto the registration? So this is a good question because it starts to open the dialogue associated with transportation funding. The problem we have with transportation funding is currently transportation funding is a fixed cents per gallon. So you use more gallons, you pay more cents. You use fewer gallons, you pay less. The problem is we have increasingly fuel-efficient cars. We've got hybrid cars, we've got electric vehicles. Even our fully gas-powered vehicles are more fuel-efficient. So we have more and more individuals using our roads and less revenue coming in to pay for those roads. Ergo, one of the reasons that we have a $1.3 billion shortfall or shovel-ready projects today of things we need to do. So there's general agreement that we need to look at how we do that, how we collect our sales tax or our gas tax revenue. Now the challenge is how do you make the change? If we did something like just tax it onto registration fees, more than likely we would have to do an increase every year on that because the number of the problem we would have is be the same in terms of more fuel-efficient cars, more uses on the roads. So we would have to do an increase on a regular basis. So then the question comes up, why not tie it to something that automatically increases, like take the gas tax and make it a percentage as opposed to a fixed cents per gallon, we make it a percentage of the sales. The problem with that, of course, is gas prices fluctuate wildly. As you all know, they're pretty low right now. But by next year or in 2 years, invariably they will be much higher. And so the percentage becomes a very volatile amount. There's other discussions of tying some of it to sales tax or creating some combination. I've even heard proposals of increasing the tax on tire sales. So and then there's also components associated with, do you do it statewide or do you allow local entities to make the changes? I will say this, there's universal consensus, I think, that there's a problem and that we have a shortfall that we need to deal with, how we do the funding. There's not yet consensus in the House, at least, and I don't think in the Senate in terms of how we do that. There are administrative components, there's administrative complexity, there's a myriad of components that are going to come together in a way in which it makes it a very difficult problem. So we're going to continue to have that dialogue. Possibly this session we come up with a proposal and a change, but the dialogue is still ongoing.
Visiting with you, I wanted to know, what does 24.5 cents a gallon look like? How much a year am I paying? And this is the scenario they painted. If you drive a car and you get 25 miles to the gallon, and you drive on average 15,000 miles a year, and when you think about buying a car, that's usually in my head, I want to see how many miles per year this used car has had on it. So 15,000 miles a year, 25 miles a gallon, your tax liability of 24.5 cents per gallon is around $144 a year. So about 12 bucks a month, just to kind of put that in perspective as to how much that gas tax you're currently paying would be.
Okay, let me go through two of these. And one of the questions I had was more of a comment. It says your 3 employees pales in comparison to thousands of oil and gas employees. And whoever wrote that, I mean, that's exactly right. I completely agree. We are losing a tremendous number of employees and jobs with our downturn in oil and gas prices. I've got friends over at US Synthetic that they do diamond drill bits. We're seeing that across, and it's not just the Uinta Basin. It's here in Utah County. I know they had some options, some options to lay off some folks and some severance, and it's a difficult issue, and it definitely impacts us here in Utah County. I think that first diamond drill bits, I mean, we're actually the hub of that for the country, and we supply most of the diamond drill bits in the industry with Mega Diamond, US Synthetic, and a couple other companies here. So I just want to say, I mean, whoever wrote that, I mean, you're absolutely right. While the state has taken a hit, the first question was, what is the impact on the state? The state employees is an issue, but clearly the issue is much, much, much bigger and broader. Completely agree. I've got a question about the State Fair Park, and I want to address that. The question here is the Fair Park, my understanding, is that the family who donated the land gets all of it back if it's used for something other than the fair. That is partly correct. There's a portion of the fair that was donated, and I was trying to find the name as I sat here with my phone and tried to Google it. It's tied to a former legislator, and the name Senator Knudsen comes to mind, but I'm not entirely sure. And that's the Whitefields Park was donated, and I think there are some conditions. But I want to address the State Fair because the State Fair, you've seen it in the news. It is a concern. It's a concern I've had. And the legislature, I don't think we don't have an agreement as far as where the state fair should go. I've had a priority bill to help address the concerns of the state fair and address the governance and make sure that we are committed to the state fair in the right way. Part of my concern today is the direction the state fair board has taken. I've been negotiating with a bill with the governor's office. You know, what do we do with the state fair? What do we do with the state fair? Governor's office asked me, well, the legislature needs to consider some of the proposals. And one of the proposals was a minor league soccer team with Real Salt Lake, which may be a good idea. And on the 26th of this month, while we were in session, we all received notice that State Fair Board had signed a commitment or a letter of intent with Real Salt Lake without giving the legislature time to review that. My concern right now is the State Fair Park, and I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. I don't oppose soccer stadium as part of the fair because long term instead of having an 11-day event, we need to have a state fair park that generates revenue year-round. My concern is the process that was followed. We had a deal that was signed on the 26th of this month, and I'm not sure that this process was transparent. I'm not sure the process was open. I'm not sure what other proposals were made. And right now, in my position, and I know the Senate has a little bit of a different position, but I think the position in the House is, let's back up. Let's consider the soccer stadium, but let's make sure that before we do that, we have a fair process that looks at all our alternatives and all options. So I wanted to address that. I had another question about, it looks like I'm close to being out, but let me address Utah Lake. I had a question of what's being done at Utah Lake, and there have been a couple funding proposals. Senator Henderson and I both sit on the Utah Lake Commission, and there has been a funding proposal again to continue removing carp, and I know that's not appealing. Carp is a problem in Utah Lake. It continues to be a problem in Utah Lake. I think the legislature, there's some restricted accounts that deal with endangered species, will continue to find ways to remove carp because of the impact on the June suckerfish. But I received a lot of emails, and I know members of the legislature and other members here today have received a lot of emails about dredging Utah Lake. We are having difficulty getting boats in and out of Utah Lake. When you get out on the lake, you're okay, and the difficulty becomes we have three major dredging projects in the state. We've got Antelope Point up on the Great Salt Lake, we've got the Great Salt Lake Marina, and we've got Utah Lake. We've seen a number of different proposals, but that's something that I'm committed to. So as far as Utah Lake, the governor's budget, the state forestry, and they actually manage our sovereign lands along the lake. They have a funding request, which is supported by the governor's office, to use $1.2 million to dredge the marina at Utah Lake, and I'm going to be supportive of that. So that's happening at Utah Lake. We'll see some additional funding to remove phragmites, and we're actually at the point now where we're almost in maintenance mode with phragmites. So if anybody has questions of that, follow up after. But I'm gonna go back to some other questions again.
I've got some other questions that I've been asked. One of them is our resources on federal controlled lands, 60 to 70% of our lands, and what are we doing to take those lands back? I serve as a co-chair with Representative Stratton on the committee which is a stewardship commission, I should say, not a committee, but a commission that I've been appointed to. And what we're doing is we've actually gone out for an RFP to find a pathway of how we should do it. All the other states east of the Mississippi basically have less than probably 10% of their land is federal land. Also, when Hawaii came on board as a state, they actually have less than 3% of their land is federally owned. The state and private land is 97% in Hawaii. So they came in after us, but for some reason there was a gap between us, the western states. And land-wise, actually California actually has more acreage that is owned federally than what we do, but because it's a larger state. But we've got Nevada, all the western states, probably anywhere, and the worst is probably Nevada with, I think almost 90% of their land is federally owned. What we're doing is we're actually going out with an RFP to find out a pathway that the other states have used, and we're going to have to, this is going to be a court decision. We're not going to be able to get it through Congress or through this congressional or the Senate back in Washington. So it's all going to come to court. But that's how they've all done it. Illinois was one of the last ones that was able to get their lands, and we've got, like I said, we're looking for the very best and brightest constitutional attorneys throughout the nation to do that. And so bear with us. We've got, it's going to get pretty heated, I think, before it's all said and done, because we've got other states joining with us, Idaho, and they're very active, as well as New Mexico starting to, and Arizona, so Montana. It's a coalition that we're trying to get united with the other states that's been second-class citizens. The other question was excavation of the large sand deposits. I think this is about the point of the mountain, what's going to happen to the lab. I'm not sure the Department of Gas, Oil, and Mining, of course, they have to have that permitted, and so I know they have a reclamation that they have to do. There's a lot of our, Staker Parsons, as well as Mr. Clyde, W.W. Clyde, and it's been taking sand and gravel aggregate out there for years. And a lot of those people, I think, I'm not sure if they'll be able to build on it. I mean, the Bible tells us not to build on sand, but I see a whole lot of houses built on point to the mountain. One of these days, but not when, not if, but when, if we have a seismic earthquake or something, I think a lot of those houses are going to end up down by the prison, possibly. So I'm not sure if they'll ever, they might be going down the bedrock now when they get done with the sand excavation. They might be able to build houses on it once it's solid foundation. But with that, I'm really not sure. What is Utah State's plan for reimbursing private and commercial property values losses? And I'm not sure what that question is. I imagine it'll go to court. I'm really not sure if anybody else could help me out on that one. Well, it says, what is Utah State's plans for reimbursing private or commercial property value losses? I guess it's up around that area. And a lot of it's not really a mineral extraction. The aggregates are actually part of the property. And so a lot of times when there's oil and gas are not tied to the surface, so they have the right to extract their minerals, and with the gravel is not considered a mineral when it comes to that, so it's actually part of the real property as far as I know. So that's been bought or sold, so I'm not really sure how they'll do that. So good question.
Friends, I have a question real quick. This one says, do you know if they're planning a new sewer plant for the south end of the county? And just, I don't know, and that's not really anything that we deal with, but there are some municipal elected officials here. If you guys can raise your hands, and maybe we'll just direct that question to you guys. Maybe we can grab them after. But yeah, that's not something that we deal with.
Mayor, wave your hand, because you definitely are aware of this. Dave Anderson, don't be hiding, both of you, stick your hands up.
One time there was talk of doing one, and they were moving forward with it. Now that it's kind of on the back burner, and there's not a whole lot being generated through a regional sewer plant right now. So as right now, no, there's not.
Thanks.
I had one talking about wood burning stoves. Have any of you heard of that? There are currently 17 bills, to my knowledge, I think in the House and Senate combined, or maybe that might just be the House, but I know there are at least 17 bills trying to address air quality, and I love our governor, but he may have stepped in one when he said he wanted to burn wood burning stoves. That is our ban wood burning stoves. But he only wanted to do it,
I agree with him, we should burn coal.
he only, our governor, I think the ban was from the months of November to March, and I asked my wife if we ever put a log on the fire in July, and that was a negative. So it's really, I do believe that we have some air quality issues, and there are probably some sensible things we can do. I don't think that's going to be a solution. I've heard from tons of people that as a primary source that they use to heat their home. There have been people who have went to great expense and great effort to do the high efficiency wood burning stoves and done some things to their homes to retrofit, make some adjustments there, and to be able to look at them now and say, we're going to no longer allow you to use those. I don't, that doesn't sit well with me, but I do know that that's an issue that I've heard a lot of constituents talk about, was the ban on wood burning stoves, and so I would not be supporting that. So.
Let me follow up too, and I know Senator Hinkins and I, we've leaned on the Department of Air Quality. I mean, they respond to our committee, and Amanda Smith with DEQ. That proposal, I can say is, I mean, it's off the table at this point. We're not going down that road. I think you need to watch it. I think you need to be aware of what Department of Air Quality is doing, but that proposal is off the table at this point. So.
I just want to jump on this bandwagon too. I was heavily involved through constituents which is another example of, I had several constituents contact me and they said, you've got to do something, look into it. I'm not a air quality guy, I'm not even on any of those committees, but the fact that my constituents wanted me to look into that forced me to get involved, and it made a huge difference. I was able to look into it and find out that this whole decision from Division of Air Quality was based on emotion, not on science. Despite what you might read in the newspaper, that this wasn't going to help air quality. This was all about emotion. And so when we're able to point that out to people, like we're making a decision based on emotion, not on science or facts. It's a bad decision. It was a bad idea from the get-go. But that all happened because of citizen engagement, citizen involvement. So I think it's just another testament to the fact that if you have an issue that's important to you, contact somebody and get involved.
Any more questions that you all have to address? Okay. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and end a little bit early, and then if you have any follow-up questions, I'm sure that you can catch any one of our senators or representatives before they leave and have a chat. Appreciate them being here. Join me, if you will, in a round of applause for these wonderful. We really appreciate their public service and their representing us, and it's a big task, but they do a great job, and especially to be here this morning. I just want to remind you that our next session will be on Saturday, the 28th of February, where we'll be talking about the topic of education. So we invite you to join us 7:30 that morning. And again, we want to thank the Spanish Fork Salem, Payson, and Springville Chambers for their combined efforts to bring this event around. And once again, Century Duck Clinic for the breakfast, and the Nebo School District for this great building. So thank you for being here, especially all you students that were here. Appreciate you. Stay involved. And thanks again, and have a great day.